Second to unmute myself. I was trying to do it over in the sidebar and it wouldn't let me, so I had to
No
pull
problem. I
down.
thought I muted you, so it's all
Ah,
good.
that's okay. Well, welcome everyone. I am so glad to have you here, and I am thrilled to share with you some good information about New Jersey genealogy. Just before we begin, two things. Number one, if you have taken this specific class before, you'll notice that it's a little bit different. And I did this because, you know, we're living in a little bit different times now. And some of the stuff that I had in about visiting repositories and prepping to make your repository visits isn't super relevant to us in this current time period. I have also tried to put links throughout the presentation. You'll be getting copies of the slides, so you will have access to them. So that's thing number one. So you can find all the links that I'm talking about in the slides. At the end, you know, I can always go online, share my screen, and we can do some demos of some of the things that I talk about in here. Thing number two is that this class is going to make your head spin. I packed a lot of information in here. I don't expect you to absorb it all just from this class. I made this pretty packed with information with the intention that you would listen to me talk about this stuff, absorb a little bit, but then slowly go back through the slides and digest the information more slowly on your own. So please, I don't expect you to instantly become a New Jersey genealogy expert just from listening to me talk for the next hour. If you have any questions, please reach out to me, please contact me, or please contact the state archives with any questions that you have. There's no such thing as a dumb question, and I'm happy to re-go over stuff. You're going to see slides in here that I specifically put in there to kind of illustrate how to do things later. We're going to be skipping a lot of the visuals just to save on time. When I rehearsed the presentation, without going over in great detail, it did take me about a full hour to do. So I want to stick to that so we don't get too overwhelmed. So with all that said, let's go ahead and dive right in. Remember, this is going to make your head spin. So ask questions. I'm happy to answer them. So we are really lucky in the state of New Jersey because we have existed as a political entity for several hundred years. We've been around since the colonial era, and we've had European settlements in New Jersey since the mid 17th century, which is really fantastic because it means that we have written historical records dating back to that time. So if you have colonial New Jersey roots, that's fantastic because you have a good way of tracing your ancestors all the way back there. In addition, for those of us whose ancestors may have come over in the 19th century, there's also really fantastic news in more recent history because we are the second state in the United States after Massachusetts, who has us beat by about 7 years, to continually collect vital records, that is birth, marriage, and death records. We began collecting these in May of 1848. So we have a continuous stream of vital records for roughly 170 years. Now, in comparison, our neighbors in Pennsylvania only started collecting civil vital records in 1906. So many other states are not as fortunate as we are in terms of vital records. And we are going to talk in great detail about why vital records are so important later in the presentation. So here's what I want us to do tonight. I'm going to go over some very general basic genealogy stuff. And then I'm going to talk about some specific resources that are available from the New Jersey State Archives and the New Jersey State Library. The New Jersey State Archives and State Library are two completely separate organizations. You heard Nadia mention at the beginning that I used to work at the State Archives, which is why I'm so familiar with so many of these collections. The State Archives is where I fell in love with New Jersey genealogy. They also taught me everything I know about customer service, and they instilled a real passion in me for genealogical research, which I've continued into my work at the State Library. But although we are closely connected and we are both government agencies, we are not the same thing. We are two distinct entities. The State Library is one thing, that's where I now currently work, and the State Archives is a completely different organization. So, and I will repeat that. But it's okay if you just email me and ask me questions, because in most cases, I will answer them for you and then direct you over to the State Archives. So don't feel like you have to get the distinction between the two correct. So, genealogy basics. The first point is one of my favorite definitions of what genealogy is, and I think it explains it so clearly. Genealogy is the study of a continuous line of descent from a single individual, and the individual in question is you, the researcher. So you're looking at yourself, you're looking at who mom and dad are, you're looking at who the 4 grandparents are, and who the 8 greats are, and then you're moving back and back and back through the family line that way. The goal when you are studying your line of descent is to collect a birth, marriage, and death record, which are also known as vital records, starting with you and then working your way back through the generations in reverse order of the events through a person's life. So when you get to a new generation, you're always starting with a death and you're working your way forward to a birth. Especially when we're talking about more recent history, you can find records incredibly easily. You can go to an index and bam, they're right there. Other times, especially as we move further and further back in the past, you're going to be doing a lot more detective work. You'll be narrowing down date ranges. Maybe you have a location wrong, or it's under an alternate name, or because they used to spell things phonetically rather than worrying about the correct and accurate spelling, you're looking at all kinds of weird spellings. And so you kind of have to work around if you're not finding things outright in an index. So there are 2 document types that we are going to use to help you locate vital records. And these are primary documents and secondary resources. So what are these things? Well, primary documents are basically records. They are records that were created within a person's general lifetime. And we say general lifetime because the period immediately after a person's death is important. That's when the death certificate is issued. It's where probate records come in if there were any court cases related to probate or an estate. That's where that might come in, but they are roughly contemporary records to the person who you are chasing after. These records include things like vital records, estate documents, which can include wills, land records, naturalizations, and if we're talking about private records, correspondence. You always want to focus on getting primary documents because the person who either created the document themselves or provided the information to create the document is likely the person who you're researching or a family member who knew them well, and thus we're assuming that the information is highly accurate. You mostly find primary documents in records repositories, such as an archive of some kind, and also historical societies have lots of private records as well. Where I work currently at the state library, we do have some primary document collections, which include our city directories collection, and we have newspapers, federal and state censuses, and some other things, but really our forte is the secondary resources, which we'll talk about in a minute. Whereas the New Jersey State Archives is the official repository for executive branch New Jersey offices, judicial and legislative offices. So that means that they have most of these significant state level genealogical collections. So when you are looking for records at the state level, you want to go to the state archives. So this chart is just kind of a visualization to help you understand how you can do your detective work using other kinds of primary documents to find a birth, marriage, or death event. And so let's just go over one of these. So say you're having trouble finding a marriage record, which is in the green in the middle of the page. Well, what can you do? Well, did the couple in question get divorced? A divorce decree, particularly in the 20th century, is almost certainly going to have a date of marriage, which could then lead you to the marriage record for that couple itself. You could check the couple on the census, particularly in the 20th century, starting in 1900. The census, the federal census, has a field that says number of years married. So you can use that to kind of figure out a marriage year. And that's usually good for at least a couple years if the couple was being honest about when they actually married. Military pensions, particularly Civil War pensions, usually have a marriage date, particularly since the Civil War pensions that are currently digitized are widows' pensions. So I know that my Civil War ancestor died during the war. It wasn't in a battle. It was an accidental drowning. He was asleep on a troop ship in the Chesapeake Bay and he rolled off and drowned. He was on the deck and he left behind a wife and 2 little girls. And so his pension, for example, he served in the Civil War. And he was from New Hampshire. His name was Robert Nixon. This is my ancestor. His pension included tons of personal information, including their marriage date, which led me to find their marriage when his widow applied, the birth date of his little girls, information on where he grew up in Ireland, his parents' names, all kinds of other personal stuff, detailed mentions of his service records. So the military pension had a lot of information. So if you suspect that your ancestor served in the military, it's definitely worth checking for their pension because you may find some good biographical personal information that might lead you to a vital record. And then finally, what you can do, especially if you know who the oldest child is, look for that child's birth and start checking back about 9 months before for a marriage for a particular couple and just kind of see. So you can use the child's birth if you're able to find a birth certificate to kind of figure out when the time frame for them to be married was. So that's just a brief example. Again, if you have any questions about kind of using other primary documents as detective work to figure out when a birth, marriage, or death occurred, I'm happy to answer them. So the second document type that we are going to use when we are doing research to find vital records are secondary resources. And these are basically published books. And generally, we expect these to be produced a long time after a person's death. And the person who created the secondary resource did not know the person of interest. And they may or may not have relied on primary documents to compile their research. So some examples of secondary resources are primary documents indexes, family histories, town histories, regimental histories, all kinds of published works that may include genealogical information. And you can find this type of resource in records repositories, libraries, and historical societies, among other places. The good news about these published resources is that it was particularly trendy in the late 19th and early 20th century to produce family histories as well as town and county histories as well. So many of these were produced pre-US copyright law, which started in the early 1920s and generally protects works dated from the early 1920s and on. So since so many of these were produced pre-copyright law, they're eligible to be digitized and pushed online. So you can find these works on subscription sites such as Ancestry and Heritage Quest, but you can also find them on free internet resources and websites such as Google Books, HathiTrust, and archive.org. And I will mention this again later, but one of the useful things at the state library is, even though our building is closed to everyone right now, including me, so I can't go in, I don't currently have access to our physical collection, but I can use the catalog to find a family history. I can look at the publication date, and if it's pre-1920s, I can pop the title into Google and see if I can find a digital copy. So you can use the state library's catalog to create an entire book list that you can then search online and see if you can find a copy for free that's been digitized somewhere online. So I'll throw that out there and I'll mention it again later, and I'm happy to quickly do a demo and kind of show you how that works later. Just let us know in the questions or comments. The one thing that I will say is that you should be skeptical about the content of any published work that was done in the late 19th or early 20th century, because they didn't usually cite their sources. I know in my own research, I was doing one of my Revolutionary War lines, and the family histories kept insisting that this guy's first name was David. There were like 5 family histories. They all said his name was David, 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 David. And I'm going through the primary documents looking for records, particularly of his military service. And I'm not finding this guy anywhere. And of course, he was supposed to be this prominent landowner and all this stuff. And I just couldn't find him. So finally, I found another family history that said his name was William. I go back to the primary documents and guess what? There he is. So just be very careful about the content, because the information is a place to start, but it might not be accurate. So use the KGB adage when dealing with some of these resources that don't cite their sources. Trust but verify. And if you can't find anything in the primary documents, then assume that, you know, there's something that might not be accurate there. When we are talking about New Jersey, you're probably going to be more reliant on the published books or the secondary resources when you are researching your ancestors who lived outside of the vital records era, aka May of 1848. If you had ancestors who were born, married, or died within the vital records era, I am always going to encourage you to go for the vital records first. But, you know, many of us may have colonial lineages or early 19th century, and so we're looking a little bit earlier than that. And so these secondary resources can really help you in that case. So let's move on and let's talk about some specific primary documents that are available from the New Jersey State Archives. And brace yourself, this is where your head is going to start to spin. We are going to talk in detail about New Jersey vital records because it's what 99.99% of you are probably after. Even if you think you're looking for an obituary, you're really probably looking for a vital record. The vital record is probably going to have way more information than the obituary is. I'm always I'm pretty much always going to direct you over to the state archives first, because if you are researching within the vital records era, you want those authoritative records that have the most accurate information, and those are the vital records. So that's what you're aiming for first if you're researching anyone who lived anytime after May of 1848. Now, probably the most useful, or one of the most useful information for people who lived pre-May of 1848, although they're also very useful for after May of 1848, are state records, which include wills, inventories, administration, guardianships, those types of records. And so I use these two records collections kind of in tandem to straddle the vital records era versus the non-vital records era. And so the estate records are a great way to kind of narrow down death records, because the year of probate is always going to be the same year as the year of death. So that can kind of help you narrow down a death date. Now, both of these collections are available from the New Jersey State Archives. And again, the estate records, we have estate records going back to the 17th century up through 1952. And again, we have vital records from May of 1848 to the present. Not all vital records are available from the state archives, and we will talk about that as we talk about vital records. And just again, a reminder, there's no such thing as a stupid question. I'm throwing tons and tons of information at you here. Please ask questions. Please come back to me via email. I'm happy to answer any of your questions and direct you as necessary. So let's talk about state vital records. We want these records, we like these records, and we think that these are the best records for ancestor information, because very likely the person themselves or a close family member was the informant on the document. What does the state archives own in terms of vital records? They own all New Jersey civil birth records that are at least 100 years old and older, going back to May of 1848. And the good news is you can order these records remotely from the state archives. The archives also owns marriage and death records, all New Jersey civil marriage and death records from May of 1848 to December of 1930, and you can order these remotely. Well, what if you're searching outside of that time period? So if you are looking for a New Jersey civil state birth record that is less than 100 years old, or a marriage or death records after December of 1930, you will need to go to the New Jersey Department of Health Office of Vital Statistics and Registry. I just call them Vital Statistics for short. I sometimes call them Bureau of Vital Statistics. They have their own website, and you can order records remotely from them as well. So in terms of what the state archive specifically has, they have created searchable indexes on their website for marriages May of 1848 to May of 1878, deaths May of 1848 to May of 1878, and deaths June of 1878 to December of 1900. I can tell you I've heard rumors that they are currently working on transcribing the indexes to births from May of 1848 to May of 1878. So look for more vital records indexes from them shortly. These are great resources, and you can order the records straight from these indexes from the archives website. So if you are searching for a New Jersey civil vital record, go to the archives website first. because they have the indexes where you can order the records, and the dates are all going to be accurate because they are transcribed directly from the ledger indexes. How do I know this? Well, when I was 24 years old and when I first started working at the state archives, I did deaths May or June of 1881 to 1882 from Atlantic to Essex County. So I literally typed in ledger entries from these particular indexes. And over the years, many of my colleagues did the same. So the records, the indexes come straight from the actual paper original indexes, and they're just transcriptions. So it's really fantastic. So I highly encourage you to visit the archives website and use their indexes first. FamilySearch.org also has searchable indexes for New Jersey births from May of 1848 to December of 1900, and marriages May of 1848 to December of 1900. They also have deaths on there, but remember, I want you going to the archives website first. If you take one thing away from this presentation, always visit the archives website first. In addition to this, there is an organization, a nonprofit organization called Reclaim the Records, who has worked very hard to provide public access to more public records collections. And they recently received permission to share the indexes for New Jersey marriage and death records from 1901 to 2016 for marriages and to 2017 for deaths. These are digitized. The organization themselves has digitized these publications using the website archive.org. However, I would recommend going on Ancestry and using the searchable interface because you can just put in the person's name. Whereas on archive.org, you have to go into each individual index and search each one. With the Ancestry interface, it just makes it easier to search. So that's what I would recommend. Again, actually, I'm not sure if I can do a demo on this computer, but I can try and see if I can get into Ancestry on this particular computer to do a demo for you if you're interested. Otherwise, send me an email if I can't get on from here as we're doing the Q&A, and I can send you screenshots of how to navigate to that. So let's talk about the early vital records. These cover from May of 1848 to December of 1900. The earliest vital records from the time period of May of 1848 to May of 1878 are ledger records rather than certificates. That means the person's official birth, marriage, or death record is going to be a single line on the page with a bunch of other people on the same page. When you order these from the archives, they'll always highlight the person, so it's very easy for you to see your person right away. The records are organized on a fiscal year rather than on a calendar year. So the earliest ones are organized May to May. Again, for this particular time period, these early vital records, there is the marriage index May of 1848 to May of 1878, and the death index May of 1848 to May of 1878. Again, please always go to the archives website first. Family Search has a searchable birth index, which includes the May of 1848 to December of 1900. Later, starting in June of 1878, you get certificate records, which is really fantastic. And this continues past December of 1900, but since we're talking specifically about these records, the certificate records go from June of 1878 to December of 1900. And these are organized on a July to June fiscal year. And the one index on the archives website that falls into this time period is the June of 1878 to December of 1900 death. There is an earlier one for those early deaths from May of 1848 to May of 1878. And again, Family Search has the Searchable Marriage Index, which covers May of 1848 to December of 1900. They also have births and deaths from that time period, but if you're looking for a death, again, you want to be on the archives website because it covers that entire time period from May of 1848 to December of 1900. This is a screenshot of the archives website. If you want to search the index, you're going to come down here and click the image next to the circled text, and that will take you to the searchable indexes for the marriages and the deaths, plus order forms and searchable databases that cover other collections as well. On Family Search, the easiest way to navigate to the specific collection search interfaces, which I highly recommend you do, because if you use just the search records function, you're going to get a lot of noise. So if you go into the catalog, you can search by a place name and it will pull up an alphabetical listing of all of the individually available collections. When you see something that says indexes, you want to click on that because that will take you into the searchable online databases. Again, I'm not going to go over this in great detail. This is for you to absorb and digest later. There's one more piece of Family Search information that, again, we're not going to go into too much detail, but this is why it's so important for you to use the archives website, which, again, I got leather rot all over my hands from these indexes that I painstakingly transcribed. Well, I only did one. There are many people at the archives who have done several of them, and it took this was a years-long transcription project to transcribe directly from the indexes. But at any rate, when Family Search constructed the New Jersey birth, marriage, and death indexes that they have available on their website, they amalgamated not only the state vital records indexes, which are organized on the fiscal year, but also private organizations, mostly church records. And so their indexes are all on the calendar year. So when they index the state vital records that are organized on the fiscal year, and remember, a fiscal year runs from July of one year to June of the next year, when they index, they only use the first year in the fiscal year. So if you have an event from January to June on Family Search, it's going to be backdated to a year earlier than it actually occurred, which is why it's so important for you to go and use the available indexes on the archives website first to make sure that you have the correct year. Again, this is something that I don't really expect you to absorb and digest right away. I just want you to have a little tickle in the back of your head that on Family Search, there's something off about the years, and that's why it's so important to use the State Archives website first. And I'm going to keep repeating that again and again and again, because that's one of the big takeaways that I want you to get tonight. There is a way on Family Search, because they index all of the individual reels of microfilm. You can use the unique identifier of the reel of microfilm to figure out what the fiscal year is and then see if you have a January through June event that is actually going to be a year later. And I have illustrations of that in this presentation that we are not going to go over. If you do want me to go back in the Q&A and explain in detail or show you how I can use a GS number to figure out what a roll of film is and see what the fiscal year is and see what year a January to June event would actually have been in, we can totally do that. But these are just the illustration, and this just shows you, if you look on the archives website, the date is correctly listed because it's pulled right from that ledger index, whereas on Family Search it's listed as a year earlier because they don't correctly recognize the fiscal year. So that's why it's so important to go to the archives website first. So let's talk about vital records after 1900. And we like these because things get a lot less confusing. We are not dealing with fiscal years anymore. We are back on calendar years. Yay! If you are talking about records after 1904, and this is more for when the state archives reopens and you're actually able to go back in person and look at the microfilm yourself, it's incredibly easy to use because records 1904 and on are organized in alphabetical order by the person's last name within the calendar year. So if you ever visit the archives when we are back to normal, that's a great place for newbies to start. It gets you very familiar with using the vital records. And marriages, again, will be organized by the groom's last name rather than the bride's, although there is the bride's index. For now, we will be going online and we will be using those Reclaim the Records indexes either via Ancestry or via archive.org. Right now, again, the archives currently owns birth records from 1904 to 1919. Every year when an entire year of records turns 100 years old, the archives assumes ownership. So in January 2021, the archives will assume ownership of all 1920 records, and they will be available to order from the state archives website rather than from the Bureau of Vital Statistics. And the archives currently owns New Jersey marriage and death records from 1904 to 1930. Again, Reclaim the Records has those New Jersey marriage indexes from 1901 to 2016 and the death indexes from 1901 to 2017. It's much easier to search these on Ancestry. So that was vital records. Now let's talk about estate records. Again, we like these because they enable us to find a probate year, which narrows down a year of death for us. So that's really fantastic. The estate records date back to roughly 1670 and go up to 1952. You can order these remotely from the state archives again. These are split into two separate collection, the wills, or the estate records, I should say, because not every estate record has a will included with it. The wills and estates that were filed with the Secretary of State's office, which date from the colonial era up to 1900, and then the wills that were filed with the Superior Court from 1901 to 1952. Estate records include documents such as wills, inventories, administrations, and guardianships. Of course, we really like wills because that can include detailed kinship information that might lead us to find more family information and give us more clues when we're researching genealogy. But every single probated estate record, regardless of whether it includes a will, is always going to include a year of probate, which is really useful for us because, again, we can use this year to figure out when a person died. If you are looking for a death record, this may help you find someone who died after May of 1848. And if you're looking pre-May of 1848, it may at least help you to navigate to local church records, which may have burial information. And what's really nice is as we move into the Superior Court wills is many of them, particularly the ones that are a little bit later in the 20th century, will outright give you an exact date of death right on the probate document. So that's really fantastic. When this is going to be a really excellent starting point when you're doing your pre-vital records era research. essentially, because of that probate date, which is going to help you narrow down to that year of death. So there are a bunch of indexes that are available to you online because, again, these were produced pre-copyright law, so they've been digitized online. If you are looking for just straight up indexes, the index to New Jersey wills is going to give you a probate date, a file number, and the types of documents that are included in the estate papers. And again, you can order any of these documents from the state archives. There is a second publication that's going to be particularly useful if you're researching in the colonial or early 19th century period. The Calendar of New Jersey Wills, which is typed abstracts of estate files. And that's fantastic too. If you have great difficulty reading the 18th and 19th century handwriting, this will give you a brief little summary of what what the document says, essentially. All of these are digitized. Both sets of these publications are digitized on Ancestry, and you can find them on Google Books and archive.org as well. Unfortunately, if you are looking at the 20th century wills, there is only one index for these. It's a card catalog index. It has not been digitized, and it is in the archives. So right now, you just kind of have to place the order for the will, and there's nothing that you can search online that's going to help you narrow down a probate date for this particular collection. Regardless of where you find the searchable estate records, you're going to be, or the searchable indexes, you're going to be ordering any of these estate records from the state archives. They don't have a searchable index, just the order form. So you're using the separate digitized record sets, or I should say the separate digitized indexes. These are published indexes that have been digitized. So you're using those to find an entry to see if the person has a will, and then you take the information from that entry and you go on the archives website and you place your order. If you can't find anything in these two state collections and your relative died in the late 18th century or later, every county in New Jersey has a surrogate's office. You can go to the surrogate's office, which manages all of the probated records for the particular county, and you can do an estate search there. So not everybody followed the rules that they were supposed to. You're supposed to file with the state until they dissolved the Secretary of State's office collecting the wills, and then it became a county function. So some people filed with the county rather than filing with the state like they were supposed to. So if you don't find your relative listed in the state records, I would check the county surrogates as a backup. So let us talk about what we have available at the state library for you in terms of secondary resources. Now, remember that I said, unfortunately, the building is closed, and that includes it being closed to me. However, you can use the library catalog, which is accessible to you 24/7 for these books that were published pre-copyright law, to do searches and to try to find digital copies of the books somewhere online. We do have quite an extensive book collection. Our family history section makes up about 1/3 of our collection. I would say that's one of our most popular portions of our genealogy collection at the state library. In addition to family histories, we have tons of other secondary resources for many other states and countries. In addition to our book collection, we do have quite an extensive newspaper collection. We have newspapers representing 20 out of the 21 New Jersey counties, and we have over 1,000 New Jersey city directories available as well. You can access the library catalog through our website, and I also have a link to it through the Genealogy Research Guide. Again, I'm happy at the end, if you would like, I can go on the library's website and show you kind of how to navigate to the catalog, how to do a subject keyword search to look for the family histories and do that. So what you can do on the library catalog, because our catalogers have gone through the family histories and town and county histories as well, and they've combed the index to pull out all of the surnames that are mentioned in a particular book. So every single surname in a family history book is cataloged in our catalog, and you can do a subject keyword search to generate a book list of books at the state library that contains that particular surname. So if you want to know what the state library has for the Abbott surname in our collection, you can do a subject keyword search in our catalog structured as the surname of interest plus the word family in quotes, and that will give you a comprehensive listing of what we have, where that particular surname appears. Again, you can then take that list, sort it by publication date, and find the books that are pre-copyright law, and then you can go out onto the internet and try to get a digital copy of a book, because like I said, unfortunately right now, even I don't have access to our actual physical collection. In addition to our family histories, we have regional collections for New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. Although some ancestors made big dramatic moves, many ancestors stayed in the same region. They just kind of hopped state borders every now and then. So we have a pretty strong collection for you to trace your relatives in and out of New Jersey that way. We also have tons of general United States military resources, heraldry guides if you're researching family crest for your noble European families. We have European and American ethnic resources. We have religious genealogy group resources. And in addition, we also have some non-United States resources as well. So our goal in maintaining this collection is for you to be able to follow your ancestors in and out of the state of New Jersey, particularly if you're looking in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. And this is just a screenshot of the NJSL main page. In the lower right-hand corner of the page, there's a little box that says Catalog Searches and Tools. And you can search the library catalog right from here. Just make sure you're clicked on that second NJSL catalog tab. You can also enter the catalog proper by clicking on the advanced search, and that takes you right into the catalog. You can use the search button right there, and you can do a subject keyword search from there using the drop-down menu, and do a search right there. It will pull up the results from the catalog from there as well. In addition to our book collection, the state library subscribes to a service from SpringShare called LibGuides. And this service enables librarians to create web pages with tons of subject guide informations, essentially. We have more than just genealogy related research guides. We have a plethora of topics, but the three that are most relevant for genealogy research are: one, the Genealogy Research Guide, which I created. I essentially used the Genealogy Research Guide to build this presentation. And what I have tried to do is to differentiate between what the state library has versus what the state archives has versus what the county offices have. In addition, I've created some general handouts for you. I have some of my recorded past classes up on there, and other resources. One of the things that I'm most excited about that I've done recently is I've created a living document called the Genealogy and Quarantine document that's linked on the Genealogy Research Guide. It's a Google Docs document. It's a living document, which means I'm continually updating it. And what I've tried to do is give you access to as many digital collections related to New Jersey and the regional area as I possibly can. So I went through and I collected links to as many digital collections, online indexes, anything that I could find around the internet to better enable you to do genealogy at home. So that's something I'm super proud of. That's available on the Genealogy Research Guide. And I need your help. If you know of anything that you would like to see added to the Genealogy and Quarantine document, you can email me any suggested changes that you would like to see or any suggested additions of digital collections and other things. And I'm happy to review them and add them to the document. So that's the Genealogy Research Guide. In addition, we have a newspaper research guide which lists our newspaper holdings at the state library. Again, right now we don't have physical access to this collection. The building is closed to everyone, including librarians. But it does give you an idea of what we do have available. We do have other digital resources that we can do, more obituary research for you remotely. So fear not, we still may be able to help you. And if we can't, we know tons of local public libraries and we can get you in touch with them. What I think will probably be most useful to all of you in the current era is the Digitized Historic New Jersey Newspapers Research Guide. And our librarians went through and looked for New Jersey newspapers that were digitized online. These were digitized in both paid repository sites such as Ancestry, newspapers.com, Genealogy Bank, and also free online resources. There are several library systems in New Jersey that have digitized some of their newspaper collections and offer them freely online in addition. Unfortunately, many of the subscription sites mentioned on the site, the state library doesn't actually subscribe to. However, you can always check with your local public library to see if they're a subscriber. If you know someone who does genealogy and can loan you their account, you can get in that way too. You can always email me and say, hey, Regina, I saw that this was on Genealogy Bank. Does the state library have a Genealogy Bank subscription? Say, and I will tell you, no, unfortunately we do not, but here's an alternative that maybe you could try your local public library. So I think that will be of particular interest and relevance to many of you. So this is the final thing that we are going to discuss. We are all done. I know that your heads are spinning and you are like, what just happened to me right now? My brain, my poor brain. But again, I'm always here to answer your questions. Do not worry. I will not set you loose upon the world of New Jersey genealogy without further assistance. So when you are starting out doing your genealogy, you always want to start with you. Do you have all your documents in order, all your life documents, all your marriage and birth events, your military records, your divorce records, any records that are relevant to your life? Then go back to mom and dad. And then you go back to through the generations and you look for those vital records. And you're going in order, starting with you, mom and dad, and grandparents, and back and back and back. And you're always starting with the last event in a person's life, their death, and you're working your way forward through their birth. Remember that the state archives has those searchable indexes for marriages, May of 1848 to May of 1878, deaths, May of 1848 to May of 1878, and deaths, June of 1878 to December of 1900. And what are we doing? We are always going to the state archives website first. If that is the one thing that you take away from this presentation, I must have said that to you like 20 times. I know I'm being annoying, but I want it drilled into your head. Go to the state archives website to look at vital records indexes first. And the most important reason that we want to do this is because we know that these indexes on the archives website were directly transcribed from the original indexes, so we know that the year of the event is going to be accurate. Because Family Search did not recognize fiscal years, January through June events are likely going to be a year off. And that's just for New Jersey records. Other states organize their records differently. When you are looking on Ancestry, these are just a few of the collections that they have that might be useful. They have those vital records indexes from Reclaim the Records. They have federal population census records. They have the Social Security death indexes. And in addition, they have the New Jersey state censuses. The New Jersey state censuses are particularly useful for that gap between 1880 and 1900. As many of us know, the 1890 census was largely destroyed in a fire. So using the New Jersey state censuses to fill in those gaps narrows this gaping 20-year hole into a 5-year hole from 1880 to 1885, a 10-year hole from 1885 to 1895, and then another 5-year hole from 1895 to 1900. So that is something that is incredibly useful. Currently, ProQuest is the hosting venue for Ancestry Library Edition, which most public libraries have subscriptions to, and they have made it remotely available because of the current pandemic. My understanding is that they are evaluating the remote use on a month-to-month basis, and currently they are offering remote access with your local public library card through September of 2020. Another subscription website, Heritage Quest, has the Revolutionary War pension files. Remember, we like pensions because they have tons of biographical information. They might have a marriage date for you or some other date that is going to help you find a birth, marriage, or death events. And they also have tons of digitized family and town histories. If you are a New Jersey resident, you can access Heritage Quest from home, and this is not temporary, this is permanent, through Jersey Clicks with your local public library card. And FamilySearch.org is a website that is freely available anytime, 24/7. You just have to log in and create a free account to use it. Again, they do have those other vital records indexes. They're still great and really useful, especially since the state archives does not have indexes to everything transcribed yet. And this really helps to fill in the gaps. So they have those vital records indexes from May of 1848 to December of 1900. They've added more since then. I've seen a bunch of the Reclaim the Records thing indexes on there, and it changes daily. Again, they also have the New Jersey state censuses, and they have tons of other stuff as well. I have highlighted some of the incredibly useful things in that genealogy and quarantine document that I was telling you about that are available via Family Search. It's a really powerful resource. And again, it's non-subscription, so you can access it from home 24/7. Finally, the most important thing that I want you to take away, if it's anything besides to go to the archives website first, if you need any help whatsoever, please reach out to me. Please reach out to the staff at the State Archives with any questions. We are very patient. We want you to talk to us about your genealogy woes. I don't care how many times I said something. Please just send me an email. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. We are here to help you with your New Jersey genealogy. So with that, thank you all so much. I know I made your head spin. Again, I am happy to answer your questions. And if you have any follow-up questions later, please just send me an email, or even if you just want to talk genealogy, I'm happy to do that. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Regina. That was a lot of information, but very useful and thorough. We do have about, I think there were like 6 questions in the chat. The first question, do you need a library card to research all of this? I think you kind of answered that as far as the Jersey ClickBooks goes, but I think they're asking more about the NJ State Library.
Well, you don't need a library card to access the library catalog. You can use that, anyone can use the state library's library catalog. And remember, right now our building is completely closed, even to staff, so even to me. So I can't get in to use my own genealogy collection there. But like I said, so many of these books, it was very trendy and popular to write these genealogy books in the late 19th and early 20th century. So many of these books are pre-copyright law. So many of the books in our genealogy collection are probably out on the internet somewhere. So again, you can use the library catalog to build a little book list to check online. You just need to make sure, I think it's pre-1923, you're good, that it was published pre-1923. If you look in the library catalog, you'll see like the third line of a summary entry always gives you the publication date. In the library catalog, you always have the option of sorting by publication. It's in the upper right-hand area of the result screen. There's a little sort by drop-down menu, and you can click by publication date. You are also able to email a list of results to yourself down at the bottom of the page. So you can email all of the Abbott books to yourself, a complete list of Abbott books that we have available at the State Library. Again, you can sort those by publication date, figure out which ones are pre-copyright law, and go online and see if you can find a digital copy somewhere. So you don't need a library card to use any of the research guides. You don't need a library card to search the state library's catalog. You don't need any kind of card to go on the archives website to search any of their indexes. And again, remember, you have access to these websites like HathiTrust, archive.org, Google Books, and Family Search, which are freely available online. And again, I have that genealogy and quarantine document linked on the genealogy research guide, which gives you direct access to a whole bunch of other digital collections and a whole bunch of other collections than what we talked about tonight.
Awesome. And the second question was, are court case records public and available?
It depends on what time period you are talking about. Court cases can be genealogy gold mines. The State Archives has a number of court records for both the New Jersey Supreme Court, some of the county courts of common pleas, and some of the other state level courts such as the Orphans Court, the Chancery Court, and things of that nature. Some of these date back to the colonial era. Some of these, depending on, when the court was formed, it's a little bit later. If you have any specific questions about a specific time period of court records, please send me an email and I can answer that in greater detail. I admit I am not as strong on the 20th and 21st century court records. My understanding is you go through the county clerks for those, because the county clerk is often the clerk of the Court of Common Pleas as well. So it depends on what you're hoping to find there. The one exception, if you're looking for a pre-1949 divorce degree, those are at the state archives. They have all of those pre-1949 now, so you would contact them.
The next question was, are there any remote/online volunteer opportunities at the state library or archive?
Currently, no. However, one of the sections of the genealogy in quarantine document does have remote volunteer opportunities. Some of these are or outdoor volunteer opportunities. I reached out to several organizations and asked if they had anything available. I included things like cemetery cleanups, things of that nature, and also a bunch of transcription work from various organizations around the country and around the world. Two of the resources that I can personally recommend for transcription are informationwanted.org, which is post-Civil War. Many people who had formerly been enslaved and had their families torn apart by slavery put out advertisements looking for family members who they had lost through slavery and wanted to be reunited from them. These were published in many African-American newspapers around the country. Informationwanted.org is an organization that is digitizing these and making them searchable, and transcribing, which is really fantastic. And they're looking for volunteers to transcribe these ads. So you can help people who are trying to do genealogy. There are a lot of Civil War veterans who are looking for their family members on there, and it's incredibly cool. The other one that is incredibly cool, and I don't know if any of you are familiar, every year at the State Library we do a Juneteenth celebration. And not this past year, because unfortunately our celebrations were a little bit limited by the current pandemic, but the year before we did a hackathon where we did a bunch of transcriptions for a website called Freedom on the Move, where they were transcribing runaway slave ads. And I've gotten bored a few times during the pandemic, and I still have my free account, and I've logged in to do transcription work for them. The interface is really, really easy to use. It's interesting. You learn a lot. And in addition to transcription, you can also search the record. So if you are looking for ancestors, or if you're looking for a particular incident, you can use that website. And that dates back to the colonial era, and it represents everywhere. There are tons of New Jersey entries on there as well, although I've never gotten one from New Jersey. I took high school French, and I made the mistake. My very first ad that I logged in and did was published in a Baton Rouge newspaper. And so now whenever I log into the interface, and I remembered enough high school French using that with Google Translate that I could figure it out. So I just did the transcription. Now it gives me all French ads. So it's pretty funny. But those are two that I highly recommend if you are looking to do some online volunteering.
Awesome. Then we got a couple more. We have a question. Where are photos of Assembly and Senate members from the late 19th century? Very specific.
Yes, they don't always exist. You can check the legislative manuals. They have at least biographies of current elected officials and also their committee assignments, which is really interesting. Not every person is going to have a portrait. Since the person was an elected representative, and if you know their death date, I would guess that that person would have been prominent enough where they might have had their a picture published with their obituary or something like that. So it's definitely worth checking newspapers to see if they have, but as far as I know, there is no formal collection of elected official portraits from that particular time period. If you would like, you can send me an email about that and I can do a little bit more research into it, but I've gotten questions like this before, and as in my memory, I've never found like a comprehensive collection of portraits from that time period.
And then I have just adoption records, question mark, and is it possible to get patient information from hospital records?
No, hospital records are, okay, so for hospital records, it depends on what you're talking about. If your relative was somebody who was institutionalized, those are all sealed and private records. They do, if they were institutionalized in a state facility, I should say, those are sealed private records. Now for state facilities, some patient records do actually exist. However, you need to meet certain criteria in order to get access to them because they are permanently sealed. The state archives does have many institutional hospital records, and these are like mental health hospitals or juvenile detention hospitals, not like a regular hospital. So you should reach out to the state archives if you are looking for those types of institutional records. If you are looking for, you know, your Aunt Mary's surgery back in 1930, honestly, most medical records like that are not kept and they don't exist. There's no comprehensive collection of that type of record. You can try to reach out to the hospital if it's still in existence to see if they have an archive of some kind, but most, in the state of New Jersey, most organizations and institutions have like a 7-year records retention rate, and they largely destroy incredibly private records like that. Although some hospitals that are currently in existence have some records that go back quite far, but not like 100 years far. It's like 20 years or something like that. But that varies from hospital to hospital. So you're not going to find historic records, and 99.9999% of the time, you're not going to find that type of record in existence anywhere.
And did you answer the adoption records
So adoption records, again, it depends on the time period, because if we are talking 20th, like early 20th century, you can put the word adoptions in quotes. Nobody was following up on stuff like that. Like there wasn't a child protective services or something like that. So legal adoptions were a little bit rarer. A lot of times kids were just kind of placed in a home. Up until recently, adoption records were sealed. Your best bet if you're doing any kind of adoption research is to reach out to a professional genealogist. And they can kind of help you navigate those, particularly if you are dealing with more modern adoption records. Again, if you have any follow-up questions, send me an email. Because for so many years adoption records were sealed, and only recently there have been laws granting adoptees records to their original birth certificates and things of that nature. This is a fairly new accessible record type to people, and it's certainly not something that, you know, is a public record. There's no index that you can search here. Like it's case by case basis, and you need to be able to prove who you are once again.
Awesome. And I'm just going to ask one more question, and then every other question that's more specific, I recommend that you email Regina at the email address that she has listed. So the last question that I'm going to ask on behalf of the chat is, are you restricted by the amount of time you are researching the archives? So if you go to the state library.
Are you, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
could you repeat the question?
They said, are you restricted by the amount of time you are researching the archives? I guess if they wanted to physically go there when everything is back to normal.
Yeah. Yeah, right now the building, both the archives and the state library are completely closed to the public. Normal operating hours for the state archives are 8:30 a.m. to 4:15 p.m. Monday through Friday. The state library is Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. I don't know. I honestly cannot tell you how things are going to work in the future. How it's going to change, you know, to keep everybody safe and to keep from spreading COVID further. So that's how it used to be. I can't guarantee that it will stay the same or go back to that in the future. So what I would advise is keep an eye on websites. You can reach out to the agencies themselves as they reopen and just kind of see. I imagine once organizations start reopening, they will have very clear guidelines posted on their website and very clear about what their hours are. But like right now, nobody knows anything for the state library. Like I don't have any idea when I can go back and have access to my building. So, and I will have access to the building and the collection way before members of the public will, but I just don't think so far we are just not there yet, unfortunately.
Yes. And that's where we're going to wrap up the questions. We did have someone asking if you could post the online volunteering opportunities that you had mentioned, but
those are all on the genealogy and quarantine document, which you can access through the genealogy research guide. All the links to the genealogy research guide, it's linked on the research guide slide. Let me see if I can make this go back so I can show you. Come on. So if you go to this slide, which is the third from the last, if you click that link in the PDF copy of the slides, which will be coming to you, right in the header opening page of the document, I have a link to the genealogy and quarantine document there. I have another link to it on the New Jersey State Library resources page of the genealogy research guide as well.
All right. And everyone, I will be emailing everyone who registered for this program the slides. We have been having some questions in the chat about the links not working in the PDF.
Oh.
But
because I test.
I always recommend left clicking the link. So if it doesn't immediately work when you click the link, you could try left clicking the link and it might give you the option. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, and I tested them, the links out in the PDF before I shared, and they worked. So.
And also I recommend if people are having issues, try to download it and open it in Adobe. Maybe it might not be working if you're opening it in the browser. So that could also be an option. But yeah, but thank you so much, Regina, for this comprehensive workshop. I think everyone is leaving here with a lot of knowledge, and we appreciate you, working with the scheduling issues and, generously donating your time to giving our library this presentation.
Oh, wonderful. And I'm absolutely happy to do it. Again, everyone, please email me any questions you have. If you have continual problems with the PDF, I'll try to post, I'll retest the links, and I'll try to post another copy to the genealogy research guide for you so that you can have access to all the links. Like I said, I did.
Thing.
Oops.
Oh, no. And we're also recording this session, so if anyone, missed anything or you want to go back to write something down, when I send out the link for the PowerPoint slide or the slides, I'm going to also include the link, the YouTube link for this presentation tonight. So just wanted to let everyone know that.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I enjoyed talking to everybody.
Thank you so much, and have a great night, everyone, and have a great night, Regina.
Thank
everyone
you.
Stay safe out there. All right.